Now, 6 p.m. on Thursday, June 26th. We'd like to call this meeting of the Rome City Council to order. We have a quorum of council members at this time, sir. Would you please offer the invocation?
Yes, let's pray. Dear Lord, I pray for this council meeting tonight. Give the council members wisdom and guidance as they deliberate on the items before them. May every decision be righteous in your sight for our benefit and for your glory. We ask these things. Amen.
Thank you, Better.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor to the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one faith, under God, one and indivisible. Already. Already, you have a hall pass? All righty. All righty. Do we have any public comments? All right, moving on. Announcements from the mayor and council members. I'd like to remind everybody that Saturday, starting at 10 a.m. will be our push-in and wedding ceremony for the new fire truck and the ribbon cutting for the new city hall. We will have, I think you said, and we're also going to open the old school for everybody that wants to go into the old school and take a look. Just remind people that in 4 years, it will be 100 years old. Now, is there going to be refreshments? There will be refreshments provided at the ceremony. So please come if you can. This should be a big day for our fire department and for City Hall. Thanks for all the people that in the city that approved this, and for the council. Thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. We are having, the offices will be closed July 4th. And remind everybody, July the 8th will be hazardous waste pickup. And the next council meeting is July the 10th. Does council have any announcements? All right. Just one thing real quick concerning the old school to everyone. In the near future, we'll be soliciting input from all the citizens of the city. I want to know what the citizens want us to do with the old school. Either, let's save it. It's a beautiful landmark. Everybody knows I'm for that, but we need to know what the citizen wants to do with it. We can't just leave it sitting there vacant. It's just going to fall down. So I want to get, as people think about it, please, we need to submit your input to the city. We're going to try to find a formal way to have people provide that input, maybe do some town halls. I just want to let everybody know that's coming down the pike. So are there any other announcements? All right, nothing heard. Under the consent agenda, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. All right, do we have any staff reports?
Yes, sir. We do have one. Mr. Dominguez will take the microphone.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I wanted to give a shout out / appreciation towards you all to begin with. We'll start there for this department started really small, and we've had trouble in the past filling staff, and we have been lucky enough to advance to where we are today. And that is thanks to you all. And now I'm kind of moving towards my staff. So I do want to appreciate all my staff. They're great guys. They get the job done. They work great along Julie and Evie on the utility side. And I want to give a special appreciation to one of my employees, our longest employee, Chris Holsey. So Chris Holsey, last month or two, that has been working with not only moving the new building and doing our normal daily task and taking care of the guys on our daily routines, but he also completed helping me move this new building, getting ready on that. And on top of that, the side quest of building an evidence room for the police department. We made a storage container into a evidence room. We did some upfitting in there and a lot of welding. And I will say that project was mainly done by himself as he could do. And Chief Balkinselli wrote him a letter of appreciation, and I wanted to, did you send that to them?
Not yet.
No, okay, we'll send that forward, and I just want to let you know, he goes above and beyond, and he's not here tonight, but he knows that I appreciate him, and he's just, doesn't matter what it is, day or night, he gets the job done, and he's always there. And I just want to make sure everybody's aware that you see him, give him a thank you, and, he's always smiling, so just let y'all know.
You make sure he gets a cook.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We will make sure of that.
We
Just
appreciate
to
it.
give you a little detail on the upcycling of the shipping container, if you think long rectangular metal box. And both of these gentlemen took that and they had spray foam insulation installed. But then they even went a bit further and they bought a split unit air conditioner system and installed it themselves. So that Connex box will be air conditioned and the PD has a place to store all their evidence that's actually secured and hardened. They welded cages on the inside and then they have shelving in there for everything else. It is now fully waterproof, fully rodent proof, air conditioned, accessible, organized, and clean and tidy and neat and brand new, which is not something our police department has experienced in 100 years. So when I send you Chief Spockenselli's letter, I think you'll get some appreciation, but Jesus is not one to toot his own horn, nor is he one to over brag, but I'm telling you, they took something that was a pig's ear and they made it into a purse and they did a fine job with it. So thank you.
Yeah, pass this along, that we really appreciate what he did. I see what he did. And just to clarify, everybody, a shipping container is also known as a Connex. The new city hall is not a Connex. It is a modular building. I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? I think that's it. Thank you. Regular agenda. Let's go on to item number 1, an update from Kimberly Horn on the bond projects for the city, the wastewater treatment plant, water wells, and our sanitary sewer lines.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yes.
Kyle is at the microphone and will provide an update to council, so be sure and ask any question you have.
Perfect.
Yes.
Gotta hold it down.
Test.
Does that work now? Perfect. Okay. Yes, tonight I have updates on all 3 of the bond projects that we have going on. So we're going to do it in a slightly different order than what we have in the past. So starting out with the West Wastewater Treatment Plant improvements, I've got good news. We have advertised the project. So you'll see a couple of items up there. So right now we're waiting on the TCEQ summary transmittal letter that was sent over in April 2025. They have a 100-day review period. We should be getting that back any day now. The project was advertised on May 29th. And we held a pre-bid meeting on June 12th. We've gotten quite a bit of interest. I think in CIPCAS, there's been over 30 questions. So questions on facility projects are a great thing. They help tighten up the bids. One of the things that I will point out on here is the bid opening is scheduled for July 2nd. That has been pushed a week. So it is July 2nd. We were originally planning to open bids this week. But after working with several of the contractors, they've got a lot going on right now and they requested an extra week. In a lot of these cases, it makes more sense to give them the time to make sure their bids are tight and they can properly put that in. So we are on schedule to open bids July 2nd. I think that's next Wednesday. So just going through the schedule here, once bids are opened, we plan on bringing this to council in August. Right now, we've given ourselves about a month to make sure that we can go through and verify qualifications on all of the bids. The other part on this, and hopefully it's a shorter time period depending on the way bids come in. But one of the reasons we've left a little bit of fluff in here is that we want to make sure that as the bids come in, that they are also within budget. And so if there needs to be some value engineering, there's a little bit of time that we left in this. Ideally, we'll be bringing them to you sooner and hopefully everything comes in on budget and we don't have to worry about cutting stuff. But in the current political environment and markets overall. We've been getting a lot of feedback on some different stuff from contractors, just letting us know that they're escalating prices for various reasons. So we're keeping a close eye. Once awarded, we'll begin construction, and you've got the 15 to 18 months between substantial completion and final completion of the project. And then the last thing that I'll give an update on, so separate from the TCEQ permitting for actual construction is our discharge permit. So if you'll remember at the last council meeting, Chris walked y'all through why we were submitting a new discharge permit for a larger amount, ultimate conditions. And so we're currently on track with that. That's been submitted to TCEQ. It's in their hopper right now, standard timeframes. And so we're awaiting the notice of application and preliminary decision. That's the draft permit. It's anticipated in September. And then the final decision posting is in October. So nothing there will impact the construction piece of this. It just has to all be completed prior to the treatment plant being in operation. Any questions on the treatment plant?
So just so I understand correctly, now that it's going out for bids, we're already being threatened with price hikes.
Well,
That'll go outside what we were, you know, our estimation.
yeah, so when.
So it's because we've been waiting a year and a half. And now they're telling us they're gonna start jacking our prices up?
Well, so you may be misconfusing a little bit
Okay.
of that. And so let's be clear about this. As we're going through the bidding process, we're closely communicating with all the contractors.
Mhm.
That's a normal part of the process. Obviously, there have been quite a few tariffs that have been coming out, and people have varying opinions on where that's going to land and what the pricing for that looks like. So some of that is being built into costs, some of it's not. It just depends on where we're at on things.
Got this done soon, we would have missed it.
So what about contingency fees that are built in? Do we have some cushion in our current proposal?
Yeah, so the way that the bid has been structured is we have items that were an absolute, they have to be done. Then there are items that are wants or extras that would be nice to have. And so we've separated those out, and that was part of something that we worked out with Jesus when we were going through the process of putting together the proposal form. And so there is the availability to cut items as necessary to make sure that we're still meeting everything within the budget. Okay,
Can I ask a question?
absolutely.
The bond amount is public knowledge, correct? So they kind of know how much we have to spend.
Yes.
Okay, I was just wondering how that worked because, I mean, they're all gonna be pretty much at that bond limit, correct?
Well, so there's a lot of different theories on the way that happens when we go through bidding. This is kind of a similar philosophy on, we go through and do opinions of probable construction costs prior to bidding. That's something that we share with the city so that they're planning on city staff, so that they're planning their budgets correctly. There are different theories about sharing that information in advance and if contractors will alter bids, like if they think that they're coming in lower, if they'll alter them to be closer to that or not. The reality is that in Texas, we put some level of constraint on the contractors because as a city, you are required to choose the lowest bidder unless there is a very valid reason for choosing someone other than that. And so that's where the caveat comes in. So they know where their real prices are sitting, right? And if they want to play games, it depends on how hungry they are for work. And the reality is that if a contractor really wants something, they're going to bid the job as competitively as possible, with their margins exactly where they need them to be because they need the work. If in time periods where you have a lot of work that's outstanding, sometimes you'll see contractors throwing larger prices at things because if they win, that's great. And if they don't, then that's also great. It's a lot of it's market driven on the other projects that are out there in the market.
Okay.
So I guess to your question specifically about knowing what the city's budget is, generally speaking, that won't really sway for the contractors. put their price.
Now, you said we're required to pick the lowest bidder. What if you have knowledge that this lowest bidder is not reputable or?
Yeah, you're absolutely able to go with the second one. I've been in situations where I've done that before. The key thing to it is that you have to have very strong reasons for why you're doing that, and justification for that process. But yeah, absolutely. I've been in situations where cities have worked with that contractor before. They were the lowest bidder and they actively chose to go with the next lowest bidder. We provide reasons for that, and that's something that we would work with staff on how that's worded and what that looks like, but it's ultimately a council decision. So. Any other questions on the treatment plan? Okay. So moving on to the sanitary sewer improvements. Right now, we're still working through final design and our text off permitting. And then the next month, we have our advertisement. So kind of running through the schedule. We're actually wrapping up our internal review right now on the 90% plans and planning to submit those to the city next week. And then quickly looking at scheduling a review meeting the following week as well. Where this puts us from a bidding and advertisement schedule, we're planning on advertising in mid-July and then opening bids in August. One of the things that you'll notice is that we're showing construction in August. Because of the nature of the sanitary sewer projects, we'll actually be able to open bids and then quickly move into the next council meeting with an award. So different from the facility type projects where there's a lot of variables to it and qualifications become much more, I guess, fine-tuned. A lot of the linear projects are a lot more straightforward. And so you either have the experience or you don't, and it's a lot easier to move forward on the qualification side of that. And then on the water wells, we've had quite a bit of coordination with the drillers. And this is a really important piece of how we're laying out our well locations on the site. Some of our sites have, specifically the FM 3433 site, has quite a bit of challenges because of where it sits on a hill and the amount of space that you're required to have in order to drill flat area layout areas to bring in the equipment. And so we've been working closely with a couple of different drillers to make sure that we've got that design really down. So moving into final design and our TCEQ permitting is what we're working to wrap up on that right now. So lagging shortly behind the sanitary sewer mains, planning to submit 90% design on that in early July, and then finalizing that and then moving forward with advertisement and bidding in later July, all the way into September. That would be an award in the September timeframe. The other thing, I think we talked about this a little bit at the last council meeting, but your wells are not a typical construction project. So we'll actually go through, drill the wells, they'll run the test well scenarios on them, and then you go through the TCEQ use permitting process. Once that's completed, then the wells are finalized and you can actually use them. So
Kyle, can you go through the construction steps that shows there for 7 months? It's not just as simple as what you do residentially. Can you explain or unpack that a little for us?
yeah, that's a great question. So when you're going through and doing construction of a well, like I mentioned, because of the depth and the uncertainty of the usage that you're going to get out of these, the wells are drilled initially, and then they use test pumps. And so basically we spec out a certain level of pump that you have to include on the project. They run the test pumps to see the quality of water and the amount of water, and then you respec the actual pumps that you would use. Now, in our case, in theory, because of the way that our permitting is with Upper Trinity Groundwater Conservation District, we have a fairly good idea of what our pump sizing will be because they should be smaller than what the groundwater district anticipates the usage from the wells would be. And a lot of this has to do with our permit limits based on the proximity of other wells in the area. But you'll go through, you'll put in the test wells, you'll identify what your actual production rates are coming out of that. And then they go through the process of ordering the pumps and installing the actual pumps that will stay there permanently. Now, in the meantime, while all of this is testing, for instance, on your well 5 site, we're planning on adding additional ground storage. And so while the test wells are being run, the contractor will be able to move forward with construction of the ground storage tank. And then all of your yard piping gets finalized after that. So your FM 3433 will have initial construction activity. There will be a slight lag while you're going through the testing period. Your well 5 site will have relatively constant construction activity because there's other improvements that are having to happen on that site as well. And then after all of that's said and done, then you go through the TCEQ permitting process, and you'll see that it's a 3-month deal because they get 60 to 100 days to review things.
So is the construction timeline that says 7 months, September to January is actually just 5. So are you including TCEQ there?
So, we may have had a mistake on it,
So
but it would start in September, so it would go.
go 7 months,
Yeah.
so through
Yeah.
March.
But your use permitting should be able to start prior to that because, again,
It's concurrent.
yes, there's construction pieces that have to happen. Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Good question. That's everything I have on the bond projects. Any other questions?
So we should start to see dirt turning in August.
Yes, well, August-ish. You'll have a few weeks of submittals, so contract documents have to be signed.
I'm just worried before we get the new plan in, we go into the rainy season again and go through more TCEQ spanking us for having spillages, and we're gonna be paying fines again. Now, yeah, we've been trying to get away from that, so.
Well, now there are some ways to navigate some of that, like once you're actually under construction, TCEQ fines are addressed slightly differently. And
But we still have to clean up the spills,
correct, yes,
and that costs money.
yes.
Okay.
I did see there was construction on the water well on First Street. Is that from the grant? Okay.
And that project is just about wrapped up, actually, so. Anything else?
Well, thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, moving on. If there's any further discussion on this, sorry. All right, moving on, we want to move on to Councilmember Loftus, for abandoned properties.
One moment.
Thank you, Council. While we are teeing that up, Brooke is going to pull up a presentation that Mr. Loftus has given to us. You also have a printed copy of that at your place so that you can follow along in the event the technology doesn't work well. And we will tee that up for Mr. Loftus to walk through and then take some notes and get staff direction once the conversation is concluded. Mr. Loftus?
Okay, how this kind of originally came around, had abandoned properties on my mind because I was trying to contact someone because I was interested in a piece of equipment on the property. And I ran into a situation where the individual who's the owner lives in assisted living. And so his children were actually in charge of the property. I couldn't find any information on how to contact them. Anyway, and then about that time, we were going through all the information about the right of ways, drainage and everything. And I was over talking to Jimmy and I at his house one day. And he was mentioning how over in Crown Point, a lot of the homes are actually rental properties. And that got me to thinking, wow, we got a lot of rental properties probably in this town. And so that's how it kind of came around. And then I ran into this Texas Problem Properties Toolkit. I may have sent you a link to that. And so this is kind of some ideas that came out of this toolkit relevant to our situation. And, my idea is we need an inventory of these properties. And because we're trying to prepare for a code compliance position. And I believe that an inventory of these properties provides a base of information to allow this person to step right in and become more productive immediately. And it's not intended to be an HOA or anything like that. So don't get that. And also I want to get everyone else's feedback because you probably have different ideas. And this is the only time we can discuss this all as a group. So there are short-term rental properties. And I think that's important from the standpoint of not only code enforcement, but police and fire operations also. We'd be able to communicate more readily with property owners and also enforce, in this case, the hotel occupancy tax on short-term rentals. And then how do we deal with these nuisance, there are nuisance short-term rentals, you know, parties all the time and stuff like that. You hear about it all the time. And allow us to set expectations to the property owners. And I just want to let you know, as of yesterday, there are no short-term rental properties advertised in Rome, with the exception of Motel 6 claiming to be an Airbnb. And then long-term rental properties, again, identification, code enforcement, police and fire operations, communication, very similar. I was thinking, you know, one way to get a handle on this also, do we have occupancy permitting at this time?
As far as the number of people that can be within a home,
No, in a lot of municipalities I lived in before I moved in, I had to have an occupancy permit.
not for residential. We don't have a certificate of occupancy for residential.
Okay. That may just be a way that we could enforce this. And I thought for a long-term rental, setting responsibility for utility payments. I mean, we should know if the renter is going to be paying the utilities or is the owner. Again, how to deal with nuisance renters and owners. And then set expectations. Again. Relative to abandoned properties, again, identification. There's even more special considerations for code compliance, police and fire operations. And now I wish Scott was here because I can see where if you're walking up to an abandoned building, if it's on fire, if you got some information on it, that could be useful. Another thing I've run into at acquaintance of mine is actually moving out of their house and it's going to be vacant and they can't get any insurance for it if it's going to be vacant. So from my standpoint, if we're sitting here as a city with municipal code regulating abandoned properties, which we do have, and we're not enforcing it. If a third party goes onto that property and somehow injures themselves, do we have some sort of liability there?
The city does not, in my understanding, and that's a Carvin question, and we didn't have Carvin here this evening because I wanted to get some direction first before we brought him in. We'll call him by phone for our conversation in executive session, but the city has immunity from prosecution for things such as that.
Okay.
Now, the code enforcement component, the state has taken away some of our ability from which to regulate some of these properties. They feel like some cities like Grapevine and others, just to name a few, have become overly regulatory in some of their oversight of said properties. Where you run into the issue though, is just like you were saying, when you have folks who are using it and renting it for a weekend party place, what does that do for the residents that live here other than create a massive nuisance? And what teeth do the police have? One of the things Mr. Humek has brought up is our noise ordinance. And yes, we do have one. However, there's no decibel level. There's no really for us to measure. So it just says if it's a nuisance. Well, that's a very broad definition. So this is one of those areas that I think that we would want to pick up and look at in light of some code updates in general, because a lot of the codes that we have on the books now were kind of adopted wholesale in 1999 based on a lot of the city of Fort Worth's regulations, which really don't necessarily apply to us. We're much smaller than Fort Worth. We will never be the size of Fort Worth, nor will we have the complexity of those issues. So you bring up a lot of really good points in this presentation, and one that staff have pondered. We've even reached out to some people that we know that have some connection to people in Rome that have abandoned properties like this trailer up here at the corner and the house that's right next to it. And we've had some pushback from those individuals as to whether or not the city has the authority from which to enforce or regulate said property. Now, according to our ordinances, we do. We just want to make sure we're checking the things that we are proposing with carbon because the state has tried to step in and supersede our authority.
Okay, next bullet point on the requirement of notification, that comes directly from this document. In other words, the owner would have, the responsibility to notify the city if a property is abandoned within so many days of move out. And then again, who's responsible? If there is a utility issue, who's responsible for the utility payments? And also some cities apparently are requiring an abandoned property plan, where they have to submit a plan and state their path forward on actually making it occupiable again and have it occupied. And that type of thing could prevent substandard properties in the future. And then the next slide is, again, identification. Is it insured? I was again asking if the city has liability, and require a property improvement plan, very similar to the previous one. And then grandfather properties, when does it get so bad that the city can take action? You know, I would go.
So that does hinge a lot on your code enforcement. And as we've talked before as a council, our code enforcement program is not robust enough for what we see within the city limits. I do have a plan, if you will, for how we can address some of that in the next coming fiscal year, which I remind council is only 3.5 months away, so we're not that far off. And we will be talking and picking up budget presentation at our first meeting in July and pretty much continuing that on through until the budget is presented. We do have some creative ways, I think, to address some of those issues where we can combine a current position, move it into a different role, make it more managerial, and fund it through utility fund, and then put some of those responsibilities from that position into one that is more clerical in nature, like utility billing clerk. And then you can continue to fund things through both general fund and utility fund, which lessens the impact to both. But it is something that you've heard me talk about several times and that we've discussed as a whole here, that we do have to address code enforcement. If the city doesn't address it and it becomes a known fact the city is not going to address it, then it just continues to be a blight on the community. And many of you have probably heard the broken windows theory, that if you allow the windows in your community to be broken and stay broken, graffiti to exist, high weeds to continue to go on, buildings that have set loose, abandoned, then your community suffers as a whole. You see crime go up. You see transient populations become more of an issue. You see code enforcement, you see fires and other things. And so the broken windows theories is just the baseline, that you need to take care of those basics so that they don't become larger problems into the future that become almost insurmountable for a community our size. So you will see a request, or at least something put forward for council to consider in this next budget year.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the abandoned properties unable to get insurance. They get graffiti, they get all the pipes stolen out of them.
Or their air conditioners and their copper.
Yeah, and you know, the property just goes downhill and never gets fixed. It wasn't insured.
Yes, sir.
So, and then I have additional thoughts here that I didn't know where to stick. So, the establish improvement timelines for abandoned and substandard properties, that kind of fits in with the planning. I I was thinking, I think other cities will actually provide loans for property improvements based on a property plan. I actually see that as fairly low risk because frankly, if they don't pay it back, then the city assumes the property, you know?
You can put a lien on the property based on the variety of the laws and the things that are allowed to us, was one of the things the mayor and I were discussing as we went through kind of the budget process. We currently have a mechanism or tool where if residents' homes become too large, we will mow their yard and we will place a lien on that property. And while it doesn't put an immediate burden on the resident for issue, we work with them first. If you have a problem, if there's something we can do to be of assistance, we will in that particular instance. However, if it's just willful disregard for keeping your property up as it needs to be or according to code, you place a lien on it. And when they sell the property or it transacts hands and goes to another owner, which it will, because Rome is, given our current location and expansion and interest in our community, you place the lien, it gathers interest every year as the lien continues. And when the property is closed and transacted onto the new owner, they have to pay those fees to us. And we've collected at least a half a dozen since I've been here in Rome. Now, it's not money that moves the needle, but it still recoups the cost that we initially paid for said mowing or upkeep, and it draws a small amount of interest. So we're not really out any funds.
Yeah, again, establishing expectations. And I believe occupancy permitting could be very important to rental properties. To get an idea who's moving in. And also, you just have information. And so, when do we take action? And what action to take against that, close it, so.
Well, if I could for a moment before council starts their deliberations, I would say I appreciate you bringing this forward, Mr. Loftus, because this is something that staff have long discussed and tried to figure out kind of what can we do within the parameters of the tools that we currently have. You'll recall a year or so ago when we set our visioning and some of our conversations as it relates to what we wanted to create for the community itself. One of the values you all established was pride in the city of Rome, being glad to say I live in Rome. And it's a up and coming community and good things are happening and I'm proud to be a part of that. I've heard from some residents that when they say, somebody asks where they're from, they don't say Rome, or at least they didn't in the past. They would say, oh, I live in Wise County. We've had our challenges, but we are most definitely going in a different direction and we are seeing great strides being made within our community as far as the governance and the direction that we're receiving, the trust that the people have placed in the community through the passage of the bonds, where we can reinvest in our infrastructure, the hope that you see in folks who are looking for things to come from the city through some of the events that we have held. And we want to make sure that we're setting that expectation high enough where people are like, I'm glad to be a part of what that community's doing and where they're going. It doesn't have to look like every other community, and we don't need to say we're going to shoot for the stars, but just handling the basics are very important. And I think the things that you raised here, Mr. Loftus, get at those basics.
Yeah, I just wanted to draw attention in this forum because we can't meet individually or outside of this forum and talk about it. So.
I agree. I think that all of this is needed. I also think that there's two sides to keeping Rome, making it something that we can be proud of. Yes, the enforcement piece, the compliance piece is important, but also I think a community piece, a partnership piece where we're welcoming new people in that we kind of know who's moving in, who's moving out, which is going to be hard, right? Because we're sitting in a very fast growth area, but also I think committees and stretching like our parks department, keeping Rome beautiful, those kind of things, grants for that go hand in hand. And I wouldn't want to see it too far on the enforcement side and not be supporting the other side. So I just would like us to grow those two pieces at the same time.
And I think with the enforcement, because the police were doing the code enforcement for a little while, and I felt like they tried to, they weren't just bringing the hammer down on you. They were working with them. So I feel like there is a give and take, Like, there should be a give and take,
Yes.
even if you do have code enforcement, they should be able to be a person, personable, talk to the people and
Correct.
try and get compliance without force.
Correct, because that's really the goal, is the
Yes.
compliance, and it's how can we help you get there? Not how can we come in with a big hammer and make you do it? How can we help you get there so that it's attainable and it's sustainable for you as the homeowner? Because those expectations are there, whether you're a renter or an owner, to maintain your property. So we don't approach, most modern cities don't approach code enforcement from more of the stick and less of the carrot, because we most definitely want to make sure that we're creating that sense of community with the residents. No one wants to see someone from City Hall come knock on the door and be adversarial. That's not what we're about. It's how do we help you get there? We had a recent yard that had some lawn issues that was brought to our attention, and the chief just stopped in and said, "Hey, what's going on? Didn't know if you were aware that we needed to make sure this was maintained." And the person who lived there had just recently moved in and said, "Totally understand, no problem. I have an electric lawnmower. My cord doesn't reach very far. I'll get another one and we'll get it taken care of." And the interaction was completely nice and cordial, and kind of created some relationships, or at least some baselines. And that person who was in that house got it taken care of, and it's all done. And that's what we're shooting for, not the alternative that you've seen, where as soon as your parking meter ticks over to 0, we're gonna write you a ticket. That's not what it's about.
Yeah, and I'm not, again, like I said, not an HOA situation.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we're trying to come up with some answers for code enforcement. So we're not trying to be draconian. We're not trying to throw people out of their homes. We want to find an answer that, like you said, we would like to get compliance, but some people just might need some help.
I do
So-
like the idea of a dual funded position with utility and general funds, gives us a little more flexibility.
I think we have a good option coming forward with this current, or this next budget year for you all to consider, that I think will be as minimally impactful to either one of those funds as we can get it. And yet it will allow us to internally grow a position that we currently have, and shuffle around some responsibilities, and then hire in potential utility billing clerk at a lesser pay rate that can learn the system, and then eventually become homegrown employee for the city of Rome. So, you know, we're hoping, and we'll bring that forward starting in July.
Okay, and so for these abandoned properties and substandard properties, I mean, I guess for all of them, how do we hold those people accountable? If they're renting and you're like, I want you to tell me when you're renting to somebody else, how do we hold those people accountable to do that? Is it an ordinance?
There are some processes in the past, and I'll have to check with Carver to make sure they're still valid, where you would have registration of said units with the city. The problem then becomes administrative of who's going to oversee that, and what kind of form. It's like animal registration for Rome, right? It's non-existent, because we don't have our own animal enforcer, if you will, and the county's not very responsive in that regard. And so I took all of the budget line items for revenue and expenditures for animal and code revenue out, because we don't get but 1 or 2 people a year who registers their pet. And why? There's no benefit to them that they can immediately see, even though there is if their cat or dog gets out. So it's one of those type of things, is you still have the administrative oversight that somebody's got to take care of it on the inside. Otherwise, we've just created a program that is going to end up in a dead end street.
Yeah, another thought I had while I was putting this together is, do we have any existing software that tracks information by address that could be used to support this type of inventory?
I have to check with STW and see what, especially with the OpenGov migration, what their new software might or might not allow. And to the mayor's point, if that's legally permissible for us to do. This is where, once we've gathered some kind of direction from council, as we continue to flesh out this code enforcement concept, and we get those specifics, we want you to pursue X, Y, and Z, I can take it to council and say, okay, this is what we're thinking, what's legal and what's not, and what other alternatives exist.
So can we start out by just maybe going over those codes and seeing if they're relative, if they're updated, and do we need to change anything? I mean, are they all good?
They're not all good. I'll tell you, our codes online, as I mentioned, they have some elderliness to them, and we're going to have to dust them off and bring them into this century. But that is something that, is going to require some intervention from our city planner and our engineering firm, because it's not just a staff-driven something. It's kind of a holistic approach, and generally what you do is you package and update to your code, and you do it all at one time. Now, there are some one-offs, and I apologize, Mr. Loftus, for going long, but there's some one-offs on nuisance for noise and, yard maintenance, et cetera, parking on the street. One of the things Mr. Johnson brought up before, and we still have some direction from council to try and fit that to neighborhoods. The problem becomes, council, we just don't have any staff capacity from which to pursue this.
So, Mr. Loftus, what were you imagining when you brought this? What?
To prepare for a code compliance position, to give them a leg up when they come into the city. I mean, they would actually have to kind of do some of this on their own. I would imagine. So.
That would be my recommendation to council, as we look at it first through, if we can fund someone who can tend to some code compliance concerns, I think the rest of this will organically take care of itself.
And so that code compliance person can look through the codes and go, this is completely off base. We need to update it. Okay, yeah.
I kind of envision it like we did back when we were updating a lot of the zoning ordinances. This person can bring some codes to you at every meeting and say, hey, these need to be updated. These need to, you got to take a bite of the elephant one at a time.
Yes, it's a pretty short read if you go out there and read municipal code. I read it this morning. So.
Okay.
Can't say it's the most exciting reading, but it's really out there.
I so appreciate you being that person, Randall. I just appreciate you being the person that reads the code and brings
We appreciate your work you
brings
did on
the
this.
short,
Thank you.
the short
Yeah,
one.
the abbreviation to
This will, I think this will be something that when we do find the answer to the code compliance and we can start getting that moving, this will be helpful for this person to know these are some great ideas. We will keep this in mind. So do we have any other, you guys have any more discussion on this topic? All right, well, thank you. At this time, it is now 6:47 and according to section 551.071, consultation with attorney pending or contemplated litigation, settlement offer, or to seek advice from the attorney, the subject being now into executive session.
Be sure to turn off your microphones. Thank you.
Are we all back?
Back.
All right, it's now 7:15 PM. We're coming, out of executive session. And there is no action required as a result of executive session. At this time, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I give you.
Do I have a second?
I think.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting's adjourned.
Yeah.
You bet.